Hey guys, Super Retrocade here. I thought I'd do a video on Mister. This unit right here is what's called a Mister FPGA. It's the name of a project that's built on the D10 Nano. The D10 Nano is this middle board in kind of this sandwich of stuff here. What the D10 Nano is it's an FPGA project computer that Intel actually subsidizes in order to encourage college students and stuff to get into programming in hardware definition language, which is the language that, or the programming language for programming FPGAs. So what an FPGA is it's a fully programmable gate array. And what's so cool about that is FPGAs, they have the characteristic of, instead of programming like software to emulate something, what you can actually do is you can take an FPGA and you can turn it into another circuit. So the way that hardware definition language works is you take the schematic of a circuit and you program that in hardware definition language, and then when you flash that to an FPGA, the FPGA becomes that circuit. So traditionally FPGAs have been used in like cars and stuff in order to replace parts that are no longer being manufactured and stuff. And it's just now that FPGAs are starting to become cost effective enough to where things like the Mister project have started existing, or like optical drive emulators would be another example of this, where like the Wasp Fusion is like an example of an FPGA for the GameCube that would emulate the functions of a CD-ROM. So these FPGA circuits, like this is powered by the D10 Nano. They finally gotten to where they're like inexpensive enough and powerful enough to do some cool stuff. Like this board is powerful enough to become a Super Nintendo, or become a Neo Geo AES, an MVS. It's powerful enough to become a Sega CD. And it's not just emulating it, it's becoming it. So with Mister, it's open source, so there's all kinds of people programming the cores and stuff. So there's a lot of active development going on all the time. So kind of what all you have here with the Mister is it's the base D10 Nano, which is like $140 through Amazon, and that will come with your standard power brick. And then there's two websites to really buy this stuff from Mister. There's MrAddons.com, and there's an Etsy page. If you just go to Etsy and type Mister FPGA, there's a seller who goes by ZeroHimself who sells stuff. And some of the things you can buy is like, this is an SD-RAM adapter. This is the 128 meg one, which is the larger one. And this gives the D10 Nano more memory in order to do Neo Geo and some of the more intensive cores. And then down here I have a USB hub that I purchased through either Mister Add-ons or ZeroHimself, I'm not sure. Then I've got a Wi-Fi dongle here that I added on. Up here I have what's called the I/O board, and this is version 6.0. This gives you some analog outputs. So this VGA looking output actually can do like component and SCART and like RGB over SCART and stuff. So like I have this cable that I bought from Monoprice that has VGA on one end and component on the other. So I'm able to actually hook this FPGA up to CRTs like I'm gonna do later in this video. And then another thing that I purchased was this fan. This fan I actually purchased off of Amazon. I must have bought a different one than most people because it's like twice the height. This is a Noctua fan, and I kind of had to cut the corners on it a little bit to get it to fit properly. And I ended up cutting down the wire and soldering it just to kind of get them to be more proper lengths. And then another thing I have is I have this power Y adapter, because with my setup here, you actually have to power the D10 Nano and you have to power the USB hub. And then on this, in line with the power, I actually have a power switch too. And then an optional thing you can get is, you know, for your controllers, you can either get one of like these 8BitDo Bluetooth adapters, or what I have here is a RAFnet USB to SNES adapter. And these RAFnet adapters are made by a guy named in Canada who makes ultra low latency USB adapters for, you know, USB to every system. I had also purchased a USB to SNES adapter from Retro USB, and that adapter didn't work properly. It wouldn't map a couple of the buttons. I read in a forum online that it used to work, and that at some point there was a update to Mister that kind of messed it up. Another thing that you got to bring to Mister is a micro SD card, and I'm using just a 32 gig right here. You can use bigger ones. You can also hold your games on USB, and so far I've been okay with 32 gigs. And the way that I set up the SD card was I got one of Smoke Monster's packs for Mister, and then I went in and added the I added the cores, which are like RBF files. I'm not sure what RBF stands for. And then I put my ROMs in different game folders under system names, and I was pretty much up and running. I still don't have it completely figured out. A lot of times I run into stuff where it says I'm missing different files when trying to play different cores and whatnot. But I've got Neo Geo working 100%, Game Boy Advanced, SNES, Genesis, NES. I haven't tried Sega CD. Maybe like a third of the arcade cores are working for me, because that's another cool thing about this project is you have cycle accurate arcade cores. So, you know, you have games like Pac-Man and Frogger and stuff that aren't just, you know, close approximations of the cabinet. They're exactly running, you know, like what was in the cabinet. You know, the real advantage of these FPGAs is you get complete accuracy without any imperfections or slowdown or anything. You know, when you have a typical emulator, you know, like when you have an emulator like Hagan, you know, which is like the high-end Super Nintendo emulator, it's very resource intensive in order to get that accuracy. So then that causes strain on the system, where these, you know, as long as the FPGA can emulate through hardware definition language the chips that are in the system, it's not like it's tasking it anymore, if I'm explaining that well enough. So this is a complete Mister setup right here. So what you're looking at here is the D10 Nano is like $140. I think the SD RAM was like $40 or maybe $60. The USB hub is like $40. The fan was like 15 or 20. The Wi-Fi adapter was $10, I think. And then I'm not sure what I paid for the power splitter or that. And I think the RAFnet adapters are typically like $15 each, but you got to get them shipped from Canada, so they're a little more expensive. And then the monoprice cable was like $3 or $5 or something. And another cool thing about this is, you know, it does both full-size HDMI and it does all your analog stuff. So when you look at the value proposition of this, you can really replace a lot of consoles. You know, you even just think like Neo Geo. Like Neo Geo, to get a Neo Geo set up like I have, it's like $1,000. Where this, you can spend, you know, all you would need is a fan, the SD RAM, and the D10 Nano, and you've got a fully functional Neo Geo for like $200. So that's pretty powerful. And what's kind of a cool story, like with the Neo Geo, is the guy who released the Neo Geo core, it actually wasn't his intention to make a Neo Geo core. What he was doing was he was actually just building schematics of the different Neo Geo boards, because on a lot of Neo Geo boards there's different components that will fail over time and that are like highly susceptible to failing. So he was actually reverse engineering the circuit boards of the Neo Geo in order to make replacement parts for real Neo Geos. And that was what his project was. But then, since he already had the schematics built, he was able to just stick those into hardware definition language and spit out a Neo Geo core on Mister. So it's kind of interesting that it wasn't his intention at all to actually play games on it. It was his intention to just figure out the circuits, and a byproduct of it was we have like a pretty perfect Neo Geo core on Mister. So I'm gonna hook up my Mister and kind of show you guys the UI and stuff. Okay, so I've hooked it up to my JVC iArt CRT here. I'm gonna power it up. And one of the things I had to do when using Component is I had to go into the SD card and actually modify Mister.ini. And what you can see is it just populated the date and time at the top because it pulled up its Wi-Fi. You can see the radio button just to the right of Mister. And then you have these different options in here. You have arcade, computer, console, other, and utility. I'm not really sure why there's an arcade backup. When I performed a recent update, it just created that. So when I go into utility, there's just a mem test to make sure my memory's okay. If I hit select and start at the same time, I get in here to run different scripts, view my IP address, remap the keyboard, etc. So when I go into scripts here, there's some cool ones I know about. One of the things I did last night was I turned this fast USB polling on. What that does is it actually makes it so that it will poll the USB port at a faster interval in order to get quicker detection of you inputting buttons on your controller. So it reduces lag. At least as far as your controller. And in this setup right here, I'm actually using an original Super Nintendo controller through the RAFnet adapter into Mister, and then Mister, since it's FPGA, there's no lag inherent in how it's playing the games. And then since it's doing component video output to a CRT, there's no lag there. So actually the only lag in my chain would be my Super Nintendo to USB RAFnet adapter. So this is actually a pretty low latency solution because RAFnet does such a good job of making low latency adapters. And I'm not sure exactly what RAFnet's is. I know it's like small enough to where you're never going to notice. And then the big one down here is there's actually an update one down here. And this is cool because it'll just go out to the GitHub repository and it'll update your Mister. And then you can also do Wi-Fi down here, so you can tell it the password and SSID of your wireless network. So I'm just going to go in here into arcade, and I'll show you an arcade core. So this is 1942, and the thing that kind of stinks is when you're playing through analog, there's no way to actually scale the video or to rotate the cores, because a lot of these arcade cores like 1942 here, they were actually meant to be played on CRTs that were sideways. I think it's called Tate mode or Tate mode. So if you're playing this through HDMI, you're able to go in here and actually line double it, which will double the resolution of the video, which makes it a lot sharper. Then you're also able to flip the orientation, but this video scaling stuff has no effect when you're playing through analog, so I'm not able to actually do anything about it being rotated here. So then another cool core is like there's Frogger in here. Where's Frogger? And what's kind of cool, another cool thing about FPGAs is every time that they program a chip, that chip can be reused for the next thing. So like right now they're doing a lot of these more simple arcade games, but like when you have a game like Donkey Kong and you get it 100% accurate. Now, if there's a chip in Donkey Kong that's also used in Burger Time, you've already got the code for that chip. So over time, as time goes on, it's going to get exponentially easier to spit out these cores. Even in the short period that I've had a Mister, these arcade cores have really gone up, or have really increased. And another thing that's kind of crazy is since these cores are cycle accurate and everything, one day it's going to get to the point where a lot of people are just, buying a Donkey Kong cab and sticking a Mister in it. See, and this is one of those things, I get a lot of these file not founds, like with these arcade cores, and I'm not sure, I haven't fully cracked what I'm supposed to do to get all these arcade cores going. Another one that I know that works is Mrs. Pac-Man. Let's see. Mrs. Pac-Man. This is a pretty cool one. Oh, maybe it doesn't. I thought it did. Yeah, but then I can go to cores and I can go back up. And I haven't done any of the computer stuff. But if you're into retro computers, it's really robust in that. What I've mainly been doing is the consoles. So what's kind of cool is like if you do Neo Geo here. So I get in here, you can choose whether you're MVS or AES. I'm gonna leave it MVS. It's got the UniBIOS built in, so the UniBIOS gives you different features like doing like Game Shark type stuff and some other cool things. and you can adjust, you know, the aspect ratio. You can do original wide. You can do the scan doubling once again. Some of that stuff doesn't matter since I'm going through analog. But if I go in here, what's a cool game? Let's do Metal Slug X. And Neo Geo ones, they take a little longer to load up, as you see at the top. But then it fires up the UniBIOS. So then you pretty inexpensively have a Neo Geo here. And this is 100% accurate, like perfect Neo Geo. Yeah, if you don't have a Neo Geo, this is like enough to get a Mister right here. Yeah, and I don't feel any lag. And I do own the real hardware, so I have a consoleized MVS and everything. So then all I do is hit start and select. I can load a different core. So all of a sudden I can jump to Sega Genesis. And this is ever expanding. So I'm US. I can fire up. Let's see, where's Streets of Rage? Do I not have Streets of Rage in here? Got Xenocrisis. So I can fire up like Xenocrisis by Bitmap Bureau. I actually have the physical version of this game. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, I have all these systems RGB modded and HDMI modded and with EverDrives and this and that. But this is just like, if you're looking to get into retro gaming and you want to start someplace, a Mister is the way to go because you just get such a bang for your buck. Like you forget that you're not playing on a real system. And I think it's kind of cool too. Like I'm playing this perfect recreation of a Sega Genesis with a Super Nintendo controller right now. So that's pretty cool. Then if I hit start and select, I can go over here. Let's do a Game Boy Advanced. So for those of you who don't know, like a Game Boy consoleizer just came out, and it's like $300 just to play Game Boy on a flat screen, Game Boy and Game Boy Advance and Game Boy Color on a flat screen. So this is giving you that same functionality, and it's not, you know, it's like $200. So let's fire up F-Zero here for Game Boy Advanced. And this isn't filling up the whole screen because Game Boy Advance is like a weird size, a weird aspect ratio. And what's actually cool about the Mister core for Game Boy Advance is if I do story here, I can actually use the A button to like fast forward through talking scenes and stuff. That's where what that craziness is. So if I get in a position, a point, see. Yeah, I can't remember how to do it, but there's a button where on the Mister core for Game Boy Advance, you can actually fast forward. So like when you're playing these thick RPGs that you've played a million times, you can fast forward through the long dialogue and stuff. So you don't have to sit there and watch the text scroll all day. Oh, that wasn't too good. Then I can go over here, play a little NES. Let's play something else. Let's play Paperboy. See, and it just boots up, it just switches between games and stuff so quickly. And once you get your controller set up, another really cool thing is like when you're going in here, you can define your buttons either for like the whole core or just for the game. Then you can also do all kinds of different filters and stuff. So you can really customize the look of it. Oh no, I missed the papers. Oh. Yeah, so that's the Mister FPGA. So this is Super Retrocade. I hope you enjoyed this video. It's just a little introduction to the Mister. I have the blister I/O adapter on pre-order. So when that shows up, I'll probably do a little video about that. What that is that's a zero latency solution for the controllers. This Super Retrocade. Thanks for watching.